This morning's platform is January 6th, 2023, 2 years after the violent coup attempts with Dr. Stephen Hassan. Stephen Hassan is a mental health professional who specializes in helping people recover from mind control as well as helping loved ones to exit without coercion. He's been helping people leave destructive relationships and organizations since 1976 after he was rescued from the infamous Unification Church, also known as the Moonies. Dr. Hassan directs the Freedom of Mind Resource Center, a counseling and publishing organization outside of Boston. He teaches at Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital and recently received his doctorate from Fielding University. He's the author of The Cult of Trump, Combating Cult Mind Control, Releasing the Bonds, and Freedom of Mind, helping loved ones leave controlling people, cults, and beliefs. And I'd like to welcome him back today, Steve Hassan.
Thank you so much, Monica, and thanks for the Ethical Culture Society. It's been a while since I was here. I think it was before COVID, and Joe Schumann interviewed me, if I remember correctly, about this book that everyone was like freaked out about, and now everyone's using the word cult. And I'm honored to be here. I love speaking to the Ethical Culture Society. I started a podcast last year called The Influence Continuum, and I don't know if anyone's aware of what that actually is, but this is a small thing, but it's on my website, freedomofmind.com. This was also new. I would have brought slides and would have put it up bigger. But the idea, and I did my doctoral dissertation on this, ethical influence to unethical influence. So I say cults exist along the entire continuum. This is informed consent, conscience, critical thinking. You're allowed to talk to whoever you want to talk to and leave without fear or harassment. And the more you get over to this side, it becomes more authoritarian. And I define destructive mind control in terms of what's now called the BITE model of authoritarian control. And I did the first quantitative study on it. And the BITE stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And there's a lot of variables. Not every environment or relationship has all of them. But again, go to freedomofmind.com, learn about undue influence, and you can self-diagnose if you are aware of somebody you love who's involved with a destructive cult or yourself was involved with one. So I wasn't expecting the video, and I guess I'm just going to respond and say that my former cult was there. Sean Moon, the guy who calls himself the king with a crown of bullets, golden bullets, has a cult called the Rod of Iron Ministry, which he claims is from Revelation, that God in the Bible said you need assault rifles to worship God. And his brother, Justin Moon, has a gun factory making AR-15s and handguns, and they have 2 compounds training people for violence, Civil War violence, one in Texas near Waco, remember Waco and David Koresh, and one in Tennessee. And Sean Moon was saying it was Antifa during this, and the Mooney newspaper, the Washington Times, was saying it was Antifa, which we get back into disinformation and information warfare. So, and I should say at the end, this book came out October of 2019. I said, if Trump doesn't win the election in 2020, expect violence. And I quoted Jim Jones and said it didn't go well when Congressman Leo Ryan went to Guyana to help people who wanted to get out of the cult. And unfortunately, I was right. I can also say with other disinformation researchers, we knew there was going to be violence at least 5 months before. We were tracking it on Twitter. So it was no surprise whatsoever, and it's shocking that people were unprepared. But as you're learning, there was infiltration into law enforcement. And I don't want this to be a downer, because it's 2 years after we did, the GOP cult, according to Hakeem Jeffries and other, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, did not take over the Senate. Unfortunately, they took over the House, and so the next couple of years are going to be very interesting. But I want to be on an up. Like, what do we do now? That's the topic. But I'm happy to answer your questions. I have a wealth of information. I do need to shout out my dear friend Monica, who I grew up next to, right off of Union Turnpike, 172nd Street, 1.3 miles from Donald Trump's birthplace, I might add, but also just a few blocks from Utopia Parkway, and we're kind of like idealists, right? Anyway, Monica tried to talk me out of the Moonies when I was recruited at Queens College. I'm not going to spend time on my story, but I've spoken here before, and the videos are on the Ethical Culture YouTube if you're interested, or you can come and hear more about the story. Everyone tried to talk me out of it, and they did it the wrong way. Because you can't, when someone's under mind control, if you attack the leader, the doctrine, or the group directly, they get defensive. The cult identity feels persecuted, and they distance from you. It's the opposite of what is effective at helping people to reality test and to step back and think about, how did I come to believe these things? And in fact, for me, I could have been there on January 6th, honestly. And every tragedy we hear about, when Jonestown happened, my first thought was, I would have done that if I was ordered to. That's how far gone the real me was in the mind control cult. So as a former member, as a mental health professional, I don't like calling cult members names like stupid, moron. I think it's counterproductive to the goal, which is freedom of mind. And I define freedom of mind as freedom to think, feel, act, and have trustworthy information so that we can make good decisions. So there's a lot I want to share with you today, but I'm interested in questions and answers to know about. And I don't know how many people know about my work online, because I try to be an activist countering disinformation. And I dug up a 1986 video with me and Ginny Thomas when she came to an ex-member support group meeting. And it went viral, and Ari Melber had me on MSNBC. If you haven't noticed, the corporate media does not want to talk about mind control. So I should be on everything, but I'm not. Yes, I can indeed. Just go like this if you need me to speak up. Anyway, thank you. So we're in an information war condition. There's a kinetic war happening in Ukraine, but we're under attack here. And the correct story, the correct framing is what's going to help us get out of this mess. And so, for example, a wrong framing is the media saying white Christian evangelicals. And the white Christian evangelicals I know don't support Trump, never supported Trump. They quote Jesus, who said, stay out of politics. Jesus talked about, it's going to be harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Like take care of the poor, take care of the immigrants, etc. These are cults, authoritarian cults, and the biggest one in the United States is called New Apostolic Reformation. Raise your hand if you've ever heard that term. 1, 2. Good, I'm glad I'm mentioning it. So in chapter 7 of this, and if you can't afford it, go to the library. and I recorded it as well. Chapter 7, I talk about all the puppet masters, and chapter 8, all of the followers and such. But New Apostolic Reformation is basically a group that comprises about 40 million Americans who believe they're spiritual warriors against the evil, satanic, Illuminati, Democrats, libtards, cult of Soros, which is me. And they're characterized by leaders who claim to be apostles or prophets who speak directly to God. They speak in tongues called glossolalia, which is not ancient tongues. It's nonsense syllables strung together, well documented and researched. They supposedly cast out demons and do exorcisms, do faith healings, and they control their members' behavior, information, thoughts, and emotion, and make them so afraid to question or to think for themselves because Satan is going to invade their minds, and they need the apostles' covering to protect them from demons. Now, if you think this is crazy, that's what I believed in the Moonies. Moon ordered a group of us to see the Exorcist movie in 1974 and proceeded to give us a lecture about how God made the Exorcist, and this movie was a prophecy of what would happen to us if we left. And from that moment, this Jew from Queens was afraid of being possessed by demons. And I was taught thought stopping. Crush Satan, glory to heaven, peace on earth. Chanting in my head to get rid of any negative thoughts. And as a mental health professional in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, 300.15, it calls a dissociative disorder, and it names cults, brainwashing, mind control. It's a dissociative disorder. So in other words, the Steve that Monica grew up with, who played hopscotch and played basketball and loved music and etc., got supplanted by the Moon identity. Moon was now my new father, and the wife who's now taken over the cult were my true parents, and Milton and Estelle were my physical parents, my satanic parents. So lest you, I don't want to get too far afield, but 40 million Americans will do whatever their apostle or prophet tells them to do. And very interestingly, about a month or two ago, I did an interview with a former pastor of one of these cults and a religious right researcher talking about a schism that's formed within NAR groups. The ones that are sticking with their prophecy that Trump won the election in 2020, and the others that are going, wait a minute, everybody says, including Trump's appointees and Attorney General, that Biden won the election. So there's a schism happening there. But lest you think this is just an American phenomenon, this is a worldwide phenomenon, people. There are an estimated 650 million New Apostolic Reformation people all over the world. So the media is saying this is a popularist uprising around the world. No, this is a mind control, authoritarian attack on human rights, rules of law, and America. So that's the bummer part. I wasn't meaning to speak negatively, but for those of you, you really need to understand what's happening, who's doing it. And in chapter 7, I put Putin at the top of the puppeteer list. I interviewed Craig Unger, who wrote American Compromat, and a former KGB official who said, oh, we recruited Trump decades ago. It was standard operating procedure to recruit any American businessman when they came to the Soviet Union. So anyway, there's a whole big story that I want to tell. But what do we do? So we need to take responsibility for ourselves, and we need to stay sane and grounded and not feel overwhelmed and anxious and not sleep, because that's not going to help. but I think every person needs to understand what's happening and understand what we can do as citizens within our own sphere of influence to move things in a positive direction. And Monica and I and Danny were talking about the power of people. Is it Harari's book that you were talking about? If good people come together and pool their intelligence and their resources, and if we have a correct diagnosis, then we can take action and correct the mess. And the mess that's happened now has been percolating for 50 years. There are groups like, not only I got recruited in 1974, the same month Patty Hearst was recruited, by the way, into the Symbionese Liberation. This has been going on. Council for National Policy has been operating for decades, and they're systematically breaking down the separation of church and state, systematically taking away laws in the media to hold entities responsible. So there's a lot that I documented. So what do? Learn about undue influence and how to talk to people who have been negatively influenced. And I'll reference a TEDx talk, my last one, I did 4 now. The last one, how can I know if I've been brainwashed? And it doesn't work to say to somebody, you're brainwashed. It just doesn't. But if you're curious, if you're respectful, if you know how to ask questions, if you know how to be patient, and you engage the person, and you share with them frames, stories that are useful, people can figure it out. Because I haven't met anyone who says, yeah, I want to be exploited and abused. I want to believe lies or follow a pathological liar. It doesn't happen. People actually believe they're doing a good thing or they're following God, etc. So in my TEDx talk, I talk about a 4-step reality testing strategy. And very quickly, get away from whatever you're questioning whether or not there's influence. And I'm talking about a controlling relationship, job or corporation, multi-level marketing group, of course trafficking, sex and labor trafficking, political cults, therapy cults, large group awareness training cults, religious cults. And mostly people think are only religious cults when they hear the term, but no. And again, I'm defining it very explicitly. A group that's deceptively recruiting and indoctrinating people to believe dogma and doctrine and not listen to their conscience, not think for themselves and reality test. So the more you understand about it, and I should also say I'm part of a collaborative of former cult members called I Got Out. And we started this in the wake of the Me Too movement to say, if anyone else has experienced this, start talking about it if you're willing to. If you're not willing to, don't. But a lot of people started talking about being molested and abused, and I think for the betterment of the world, to out dangerous pedophiles and abusers. So I'm calling for especially celebrities to say, yup, I was in a Bible cult, or I was in a psychotherapy cult, or I was in Nexium, or I was in Rajneesh. There's a lot of documentaries that have been coming out. I don't know if you're aware of it, about this whole topic. But the more people who speak out and share their experience, it will destigmatize having been in a mind control cult. It's going to make it a lot easier for people to exit the cult of Trump, I can assure you. Yes, sir.
So I just want to make sure I was following. It sounds to me like you are. Thank you. My name is Jeff. It sounds to me like you are separating the ideology from the methodology of propagating the ideology, and your focus, if I understand you correctly, is to look at the methodology, look at mind control.
Yes, so the methodology, so under thought control, I talk about ideologies that are black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil, very simplistic binary things, us versus them, good versus evil. Those are universals. World is complex, people. Anyone who says they know the truth with a capital T, run, in my opinion. And I want to just do a shout out for Adam Grant, the Wharton School professor of social psychology, who wrote a great book called Think Again. And in this book, he talks about the necessity to separate your ego from your beliefs and be prepared, if there's evidence that's persuasive, to change your mind and to not feel like it's a negative reflection on you that you believed a lie or you trusted the wrong person or you trusted the wrong media source. So the point, so there's a lot more to share, but I want to get through the talk. What else do I want to say? So, one of the critical things is to really evaluate sources of information. Are they trustworthy? And there's a thing called fourth generation warfare. Has anyone ever heard it? 1, 2, 3. So fourth generation warfare was written up officially in the 1980s by an American military strategist named William Lind. He later paired up with Paul Weyrich of the Christian right. But fourth generation warfare is essentially attacking experts, attacking science, attacking institutions in order to create confusion and anxiety to make people more susceptible to being influenced by authoritarian voices. And fourth generation warfare has been launched on us and around the world, but people don't understand. These are psyops. I recently put online the first course to help foundationally educate clinicians on how to work with this population. And I start the course with an Army recruitment video for their PSYOPs division. Learn how to deceive the enemy. We're living in an information warfare time. This is not made up. This is real. It's been practiced for decades. Michael Flynn has been doing it for decades against many other countries and dictators, etc., now aimed at us, people who care about the Constitution and democracy and rule of law. So what do? We need to figure out these frames of what's happening and find trustworthy sources of information, but always use our own judgment and ask questions and don't assume that someone else is telling the truth just because they speak with certainty. I have an allergy to people who talk about things with certainty. I think that there needs, I said this to Jamie Raskin. He read 3 of my books and my doctoral dissertation on updating the law for undue influence. I said, please try to have a congressional hearing on QAnon, brainwashing, PSYOPs, information warfare. We need to have education from the top down. He didn't have the consensus enough when they were doing the January 6th committee, unfortunately, and now the House has turned. But we have to do bottom up and do whatever we can to do top down education. And we need to do preventive education, which means inoculation. We need to teach mental health professionals, educators, parents, and others how to take care of the people we love and help them. And we need recovery services. And I talk about in The Cult of Trump mind control being like a virus, and more it fits. Inoculation is the equivalent of an effective vaccine. And why do we need a vaccine in terms of our minds? Because people are walking around thinking they're invulnerable. People are walking around thinking only weak people, stupid people, uneducated people could fall for this crap, not realizing, in my case, my girlfriend dumped me and 3 women flirted with me and lied their faces off, and that began my recruitment. I even asked, are you part of a religious group? Oh no, not at all. I didn't know what I was being recruited into. But we need people to understand just how much human beings learn. We're learning organisms. In 2015, I was doing research on ISIS recruitment online, and I was invited to an Aspen Institute 25-person invitation-only meeting with then Richard Stengel, State Department counterterrorism person, Richard Haas, Anne-Marie Slaughter, Monica Biggert from Facebook, Scott Armstrong from Google. How are they doing what they're doing? And what I realized in listening to everybody's research is cult recruitment has gone online. Only it's different in the sense that when I was recruited or doing recruiting for the Moonies, I had to ask the person questions about their background to find out their history, their vulnerabilities. There's 5,000 data points on every voting American right now. And there's a company in Colorado, a Christian-esque company called Gloo, Gloo, that sells people's data to whoever wants to buy it. And so if a cult wants to come after you and they have this kind of sophisticated information plus AI, you might be able to protect yourself, but the odds are if you think you're invulnerable to it, you're in trouble. And so I've been doing a lot of podcast interviews on the effect of the internet on the brain. Very important book, Rewired, by Carl Marcy, a Harvard psychiatrist and social neuroscientist. People's brains are getting rewired. They're spending 10 hours a day. They're waking up, turning on the phone. They're going to sleep, looking at their phone. This is not healthy for our brains. It's not healthy for our emotions. People are anxious, frustrated. Not a good idea, folks. Turn off your phone a half an hour to an hour before you go to sleep. Listen to music, take a bath, chill out, write down your thoughts for your goals, what you've accomplished that day and what you want to do the next day. Get control, be in your body, be in the here and now, and understand we can fix things, but it's going to take all of us. And dialing out and saying it's hopeless is not an option, in my opinion. Playing video games or binge watching documentaries that are fiction is not an option at this point. And global climate crisis is real. And all of the oil countries and corporations want to keep us distracted from saving our planet. And we need to make that a priority and work backwards from planetary survival. What do we need to do? And right now, I think most of the politicians are been corrupted by lobbyists, by dark money. Five Supreme Court justices. I did 3 blogs when Barrett was nominated, saying she grew up in people of praise. It's a cult. It's an authoritarian cult. No questions about that. Women have to submit to their husbands in that cult. Huh? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and Ginny, please. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'm gonna wind up now and do questions and answers, and I'm sorry I got a little dark there, but what I want to say is there's hope, people, and we don't have an option to say, nah, we'll let someone else do it. Even 1 hour a day, learn something that will help empower you. Reach out to family and friends that you may have blocked or muted or stopped calling because they got in the cult of Trump. Say, I miss you. I want you back in my life. And apologize if you called them names or did nasty things. And for me, when people attack me and say that I'm brainwashed, my reaction is, oh, really? Brainwashed? Tell me more. Tell me how. What is brainwashing? And then I use Chinese communist brainwashing models that was used effectively in my deprogramming, because they'll listen to that. We know that Chinese government is doing it on at least 1 million Muslims, minimally, right now. Or talk about traffickers and pimps and how they mind control people to become slaves. There are frames that will actually work, but you have to learn first, then you can help empower others. So do you want to call in questions for me?
Here's what we need to do, because we have people on Zoom who are part of this conversation, and they can't hear anything unless you speak into a microphone. So I'm going to let Ed lead off the discussion. You raise your hand. Once you have the microphone, you can speak, but Ed's going to start.
Yes, so just everyone here in the room, please wait for the microphone. For everyone on Zoom, if you have a question or a comment, you can type it in the chat, or you can use the Q&A button and submit it there, and we'll read it out here in Ceremonial Hall. I just want to start real quick with one question from Zoom, and I think this is interesting because the word free thinker gets thrown around by a lot of right-wingers these days, and I think as humanists it's particularly frustrating and insulting. This woman says her sister joined a born-again evangelical church and completely shifted her political views, became right-wing, anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theories, but she keeps talking about how she's an independent thinker, and she came to her ideas, these ideas, independently. So how would you confront, or would you talk to someone or counter that opinion that they're coming to these thoughts independently?
So it's a good question. I don't know if everybody heard it, but what you need to understand, and did anybody watch the documentary, The Brainwashing of My Dad, or hear Jen Cinco's very good documentary and a book? But basically, there's a man named Frank Luntz who wrote a book called Words That Work. And he's a major pollster, but also a major propagandist for whoever will pay him the most amount of money. So he came up with words like death tax, Citizens United. They take real words and flip them in their meaning and use them for the opposite of what they actually mean. So when somebody says, I'm an independent thinker, I'm not going to say to them, no, you're not. You're just mouthing the same propaganda that 1 million other people are hearing. I'm going to say, good, I'm really glad to hear you're an independent thinker. For example, give me one example of one thing you disagree with. And if they say they watch Fox or they like Trump, tell me an example of one critical thing. Make them think. And talk about the need with independent thinking is to step back from your position, learn the other person's position so well you can argue it, and then you can know how to engage and reality test with them if you're really an independent thinker. So the key is, don't get triggered, because that's another thing that the authoritarians love to do. You have to recognize, oh, I'm getting emotional, they're making me angry or whatever. When we have strong emotions, our critical thinking goes offline. It's part of how the brain works. And the best way to get control again is to take a deep breath, be in your body, anchor yourself back in your feet and the ground, take a moment and think, what would be the most effective way how to respond in this interaction that will empower the person to think for themselves? So I did deprogramming, forcible, back in 76, 77, then I stopped doing that. I started doing voluntary interventions with folks. But when the internet was created and smartphones, that went out the window, because everyone's walking around with a mind-controlled device called a smartphone, where you're getting notifications. If you're in a cult, they're tracking your locations. They may even put malware on your phone, right? So the point I'm trying to say is, I've been there. I know the mindset. I've been helped over 47 years, and I'm not finished yet figuring out how to undo this. And love is stronger than mind control. Does anyone know who David Weissman is? One person. David was a veteran who was a self-proclaimed MAGA troll. And he engaged with Sarah Silverman, the comedian, and she used what I call the strategic interactive approach. Instead of blocking him, muting him, or calling him an idiot, she said, "Oh, you were a veteran? Thank you for your service." And just that a celebrity was acknowledging him as a veteran, whoa, that made a frame shift for him. And he was attacking her because she was anti-assault rifles. So she said, if you have a solution to protect our children from people killing them with assault rifles, please share. And he was stunned. No one had ever asked him. He'd never thought about it. He said, I don't know. Now he's one of the most activist people online as a former cult member of the cult of Trump. And there's a lot of people coming out now, but they're ashamed to admit it. They don't want to talk about it. If anyone's heard me speak before, I quote Monica's actions when I first got out of the cult because I felt so ashamed, so embarrassed, so confused. How did this happen to me? Monica baked me chocolate chip cookies and said, "Welcome home."
Hi.
It makes me emotional being with you.
I actually kind of have the opposite question to that. It does seem like there's this flip where they say, we're free thinkers, but they also there seems to be a lot of accusation from these cults where they'll say, well, everybody else is grooming children, everybody else is doing all these terrible things that they are very often doing. So it can be hard, when someone's talking about children being attacked, where I'm like, if you think everyone in power is attacking kids, now I'm a little suspicious of the person saying that, and very often there are these Coup members who are found out doing this.
Yeah, but they're just repeating the propaganda they've been indoctrinated with. I've studied sex trafficking. I've actually helped to co-develop the first curriculum to help sex trafficking survivors understand pimp and trafficker mind control. I don't know if you're aware of it, but most women who are lured into sex trafficking, they're 12 to 14 years of age, and they fall in love with their boyfriend, who's the trafficker, because he groomed them, right? But I have the creds to talk about, because I help people get away from pimps and traffickers. So the issue is how to engage respectfully with curiosity. But you have to understand what the buzzwords are. You have to stay anchored, and that's another course that I'm working on, is to actually demonstrate what not to do and what to do. But don't fall for it. If somebody says, oh, the Democrats are grooming people, like which specific Democrat? And I'm open to being persuaded. Please show me the evidence. And by the way, QAnon is a psyop, and it's a cult. It's an online cult. I have a bite model analysis of QAnon. I did a TEDx called Dismantling QAnon, if people want to know more about that. Yes? Oh, microphone. Go ahead, sir.
I'm curious what we can be funding at scale to address this problem. You're often using phrases like when you talk to somebody, but there's millions of people on the internet. Are there specific companies that we can fund that will put out counter advertising, or fund YouTubers that produce counter narratives, something like that?
So the question is, how do we do it on scale? I've been waiting for the resources to do mass training, and it's doable. And I think, frankly, former cult members are some of the most persuasive people, because they can share their firsthand experience, how they were tricked and they were lied to, and they trusted the wrong people, and they came to distrust their family and friends. And storytelling. And the way to beat fourth generation warfare is to have a better story, and a story that's anchored in reality. And when I'm interacting with a cult member, I take the position of, I could be wrong. Please show me, teach me. Let's go back in time and tell me, what was your first memory of Trump? And almost always they say, I thought he was an asshole. Seriously, I thought he was a misogynist. I get negatives. Oh, that's really interesting. So walk me through what was it that began to change your mind? And they can identify a documentary propaganda video. This man had his yeah, okay, but he's next, and then you're after that. So the point is we need to do it online, and also understand that the enemies will be watching what we're doing, and it's a complex system, so we have to keep refining it. But in the end, I think of former members as like white blood cells of our immune system. Like, we've been there, we are inoculated, if you've worked through your stuff. And the problem is that people have their own, not only biases, but for example, when I talked about the family, it's a cult that did the national prayer breakfasts. Michael Pence was recruited into it by Chuck Colson of Watergate fame. They recruited Democrats and Republicans. For us to diss the family means we have to talk about Hillary Clinton, talking about the head of the family being our mentor. Huh? So they don't want to go there. They don't want to go talking about the Moonies being a project of the CIA and the Korean CIA to stop the North Korean brainwashing affecting the South Koreans. It's a top topic, but I don't see any way out of this without mass education. Like, what do we actually know? And former military intelligence people they really know. Yes, another question online.
All right, this Zoom question is from Lisa. This is really good because, of course, the context for so much of the past few years is the COVID pandemic. The other rally held on January 6th, alongside Stop the Steal, was a health freedom rally promoting naturopaths, faith healers, all natural health, alt med, pseudoscientific products and services promoted often via fear-based conspiracy theories. What is the role of the pseudoscientific sort of wellness industry in these sort of dynamics in the right wing?
Yeah, so my answer is, if you are an enemy of the United States or democracy, or you have a lot of oil and you want to keep the price really high, or you have a lot of military weapons that you want to sell, you want to create chaos, you want to create confusion. And the easiest thing to do is to infiltrate different legitimate sides and infiltrate, and then start doing recruitment and indoctrination and filtering to make people distrustful of other people. There's a podcast called American Psyops. Wesley Clark Jr., the son of Wesley Clark, the general, was at Standing Rock trying to protect indigenous oil rights against the oil companies, and he was a victim of a psyop, assumably by oil companies who had hired some of these former intelligence people to take him over and get him to do compromising things in order to blame the people who were defending indigenous oil rights. And this is a real thing. This is happening. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, I don't want to do anything other than empower people to understand there really is a formula that's being used. It's not mystical. It's really understandable. And you have to be able to identify and stay anchored to your core values. And another plug for the Ethical Culture Society. Excuse me, they really are saying, be your own person, think for yourself. We're not into dogma and doctrine and some giving over your power. Be your highest self. And so the infiltration, I also want to plug a conspirituality podcast that specifically talks about the infiltration into the yoga community, the meditation community, et cetera, et cetera. You're up next, sir.
Thank you so much for all the information, and it's very helpful on a one-on-one basis. But this is more of as much of a question as a comment. With the internet, there's just so much information out there, and people can cite it to basically support any position. And I'll use the example this morning, the New York Times, I'm citing the New York Times. They refer to the people who voted against the speaker as conservatives. That's just 100% wrong.
Correct.
In the New York Times, we see this misinformation. So how do you counter people who can bring up on the internet? Again, this is not 1970, whatever. People can bring up virtually anything to support their position through the internet.
Yeah, so the New York Times has really, I subscribe to it, along with the Globe and the Economist and Wall Street Journal and the Atlantic and the New Yorker. I'm a reader, that's what I do. But they've been terrible on the topic of mind control cults. Terrible. I've been interviewed dozens and dozens of times, and the editors always take me out, and the whole issue of mind control. They'll tell stories about sects, S-E-C-T-S, and talk about how they were victimized. Remember Larry Ray and the Sarah Lawrence case? He's coming up for sentencing on January 20th. They're not talking about mind control. He was convicted of trafficking, which was good, fraud, force, or coercion. So that was good. And I also want to say Wikipedia has been infiltrated by authoritarian cults, and all the AI systems of Facebook, they rely on information from Wikipedia. And I called up Jimmy Wales. I said, this is a problem. He said, no, it's not. I said, look at this one. This is not true. Lyndon LaRouche ran for president 8 times, major conspiracist. How come the facts that he was put in jail for defrauding elderly is not up there, etc. So I'm just saying everyone should do what they can within their sphere of influence, and I and a whole bunch of other people have very concrete ideas of what needs to happen, but it's a project, and it's going to take years, frankly, to correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is about the role of, I guess, willingness from the person, like that potentially that has a belief different from mine. For example, let's say that I think that somebody has a strange belief, right?
So the willingness of somebody
of that person
to engage with you?
Yeah, in the process, because I feel from experience dealing with one loved one that either I think I was ineffective in the way I approach it, but I also think like maybe this person was not really willing to go.
I think I understand your question. So the question is what do you do with someone who's not apparently willing to engage with you, and etc. And my experience is 90+% of mind control cult people want other people they care about to believe what they believe. So that's your motivation. Like, recruit me. Like I respect you, you're intelligent, I care about you, and I'm willing to really listen to you. But it requires listening. And what I recommend is make a deal saying, can we please, we'll take turns. You share something that was really influential and persuasive for you. We'll watch it together. We'll discuss it. Then it'll be my turn to share something that's really persuasive for me. And we'll discuss it and back and forth until we can figure out what's true and what's real. And something that I found to be particularly important is a documentary by Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Technology called The Social Dilemma. Raise your hand if you've seen it. 3 people, 4 people. Watch The Social Dilemma. It's an interview with former executives of social media platforms about how they gather data using AI to capture people's attention in order to influence them. And these people are like, I'm not letting my kids on these things, but they were making money, they were given stock options or whatever. It's a very, and you can watch it with your kids to discuss it, because the children are our future. Children need to understand that the popular thing, it's making a lot of young people depressed and anxious. And I'll just come back to 1928, Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, who did the first presidential election. He's the first person to connect psychology and business and politics. He wrote a book called Propaganda in 1928. And it set the stage for all of advertising ever since. He was called the godfather, grandfather of PR. He basically said, create a need, then you can sell people stuff to fulfill the need. And if they don't have a need, create the need, then you can sell them stuff. So the whole system of capitalism, the way it's been oriented to the greed factor, is to make people feel insufficient for who they are. Like, I need a better car to be a good person, or I need to wear these types of denim jeans to be attractive, or whatever. That's not our worth as human beings. It's not by products or things, but that's the inculcation of the advertising industry to sell things to us. And, just like wake up and understand it. I recommend an old Adam Curtis documentary called The Century of the Self, if you want to understand the early days of this. By the way, Goebbels tried to hire Bernays. He said no. But the whole Nazi propaganda thing was based on that whole premise. Don't sell a person a piano. Sell them the idea of a music room in their house where the family can gather together and hear music. Then you can sell them a piano and the lessons how to learn it. We need to come back to our human selves and what's really valuable and what's really important. When people are on their deathbed, they're not thinking, oh, I should have bought that car instead, or I should have worked more hours. They're regretting not spending more time with their children, their parents, their loved ones, expressing their unique talents, whether it's creativity, art, painting, poetry, or whatever. And why wait till your deathbed to realize that you're not living your best life? Like, live it now. And for me, I want to live my best life now. I really get a lot of satisfaction out of taking a negative experience that was so horrifying and helping people. It really makes me feel great to know that people are reclaiming their lives and moving on and getting an education, getting married, having kids. What a wonderful thing. More questions?
I think we'll end it here. I know you're going to stay with us through lunch.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me. Thanks for the audience online. Thank you, Monica, for your love. See you later.